Hospital Porter's Pride and Dignity Stop the New World Order. Welcome to Panwo TV. Yep, it's finally here. Dreaming Saucers made it. Who could believe it? Yeah, I mean, this wonderful event has finally taken place. Something I've been planning for bloody ages. You know, I mean, it was months ago when I first sort of started the advanced planning stages of this particular event, and to be honest, I had to wonder if it would ever happen. I mean, this is something you know, regular viewers will know all about, because I've been talking about it endlessly. I've been advertising it endlessly, and all I can say is thank you very much to everyone who showed up. I really appreciate it. It's really, really great. Now, I first came up with the idea for Dreaming Saucers. Well, it was a good few months ago actually. It was just after. In fact, it was just after Roswell 70. If you remember Roswell 70, the event that I organised last July, and the videos, well, you can find them on my channel, and it went so well, and I had such a good time, and so did everybody else. I thought, why don't I do it again? Why don't I do another conference for next year? Because it was just so good, and one's just not enough. So I did. I decided to do another conference, and Dreaming Saucers was born. Now, people have asked me about why I chose the name Dreaming Saucers. Well, the reason is because it's in Oxford. I mean, I knew if I was going to organise a conference, it would have to be in Oxford, because it's my home, and I can't travel to somewhere, really, if I'm organising a conference there, because it's just too much to do at the venue and things like that. So I decided I'd organise it in Oxford, which is not easy. Well, it's not easy for various different reasons. Oxford's not the most conference-friendly place in the world, because basically driving is a nightmare, parking your car is an even bigger nightmare, finding things and getting around is not easy in Oxford. So I knew very well that there were these challenges were there. But anyway, I was saying about why I chose the name Dreaming Saucers. Well, there's a famous poem by Matthew Arnold about Oxford. Matthew Arnold's a famous teacher and general polymath who lived in Oxford, and this poem contains the line, "A city of dreaming spires." This is how he described Oxford, and since then Oxford, the nickname for Oxford actually has been the City of Dreaming Spires. So I thought, why don't I adapt that into a UFO paranormal conspiracy theory way, and so I came up with the name Dreaming Saucers, for flying saucers obviously. As for a venue, I thought, well, the one last year at the Roswell 70 was the White House. Now this was really, really good. Not only was it an excellent venue, but it's a source of much humour. You know, we're talking about ET disclosure in the White House, and all the Trump jokes I came up with are really, really great. So I decided to go back there and see if I could hire the venue again, and I did. And it was wonderful. It's changed hands since last year, and there's a couple who run it now. A very jolly young woman with a New Zealand accent. I think so. I presume she comes from New Zealand. Her name's Ali, and her husband or boyfriend is called Drew, and he cooks the food in the kitchen. And I'll tell you what, the food there is fantastic. It's dirt cheap. You get massive, great big portions, and it's just so tasty. It's a fantastic menu, and they did a menu specially for us. It's just really great. So it's a really, really, really good venue, and unlike most places in Oxford, it's easy to find, it's easy to get to, and you can park your car. However, there's one disadvantage, which means I'm probably going to choose a different venue next time if I do another conference, and that is it's on the top floor of. It's on the first floor. It's on the top floor of the pub. It's a room above a pub, and the only way to access that room is a steep flight of stairs. And I felt really bad, because I know there's a guy I know who, I won't name him, but he wants to come along, and he is stuck in a wheelchair, and he wants to come along, and he can't go. We had a guy actually bought a ticket. I feel a bit bad actually. I'll probably return him the ticket. Now he uses a wheelchair too. Now he can manage short walks. He said he could get up a flight of stairs, but he's taking his carer with him, and I let the carer in for nothing. But he never showed up, and I do think it's going to have to be somewhere on a ground floor next time. And that's a shame, because I like the White House, and they're really good to us. They treat us very well. They're very kind, very helpful, extraordinarily helpful. and it's a pleasant place. So it'll be somewhere else probably if I do another conference. And it was, well, I mean, there's so much I could say about the event, which I might say in a future video, because there's going to be a series of videos on this particular subject, and this is just the first video I'm actually publishing, which is my own speech, because I opened it up. And I'll upload the other speeches, all of them except Ellis Taylor, because Ellis couldn't make it, which is very sad. He had to cancel at the last minute, and there was no time to replace him. He had some problems which in his own life which he had to deal with, which I hope he sorts out. But we showed a little video that Ellis gave me to play, which is really good. It went down well. I'm going to upload the videos in order, not in the order that they appeared necessarily, but in the order by which I can actually edit them. So it all depends on when people send me slides, things like that, because I'm going to insert the slides into the narratives in this particular way. It's not the ideal way, but it's the simplest, and most viewers don't seem to mind it, apart from the inevitable Matthew Williams, who never stops complaining about anything. But yeah, that's how I'm going to do it. Now, we had some really good times, actually. Now, funny enough, like, there was a band playing there on Saturday night, not in the function room, downstairs below the function room, and they were just setting up when we finished, and I went down there and I talked to them. One was this American guy, came from Chicago, USA, and it turns out, after I was talking to him for a while, he asked about the conference, and he was really interested, and it turns out that he used to work for Man Cow. Do you ever see the Man Cow show? He did some of the audio and things for Man Cow. Man Cow is really good. He's had David Icke on a few times, and it's a bit like the Coast to Coast, his show. He talks about UFOs, conspiracy, paranormal stuff, and he had David Icke on. Yeah, it's really good. The venue I chose, I'd already decided a long time ago. I chose the date as well. I tried to make it not clash with anything, but it was inevitable it's going to clash with something. There's only so many weekends in the year, and something is always going on the UFO Paracon scene. And sure enough, Megalithomania. And there's a couple of people I know I wanted to go and they couldn't go because they were booked for Megalithomania, which is a great shame. Now, I got a bit nervous when I found out that the royal wedding was happening in May. This was announced before the actual date was finalised. Because, I mean, I can compete with other events. I can compete with Megalithomania successfully. I think I can compete with the Super Soldier event that was going to happen. I can compete with the various meetups and other things that are going to happen. But one thing I can't compete with, and that is Harry and Meghan. So I decided that if the royal wedding happened to fall on the weekend that I'm doing Dreaming Sources, I would shift the dates. Oh, and that would be very complicated because I'd have to find some more dates which everyone could make. But luckily, thank goodness, thank reptilians and all Anunnakis and whoever it is, the gods behind the royal family, Harry and Meghan decided to tie the knot the following weekend. Phew. Thanks, guys. Now, well, all that remains, I think, is for you to have a watch of the videos and enjoy them, and well, see if you can come to a future event. That would be really cool. Right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Dreaming Sources. Thank you all for coming. Now, this is actually not the first conference we've done here. In fact, 10 months ago in this room, we actually had Roswell 70. How many of you were here for Roswell 70? And a few of you, I recognise a few faces here were there, yeah. Now, this is really a historical event because it was the only event that was actually marking the 70th anniversary of the Roswell incident outside of Roswell itself, where there was a big Roswell festival. The only event in the world. So that's really quite something. We took place on Saturday the 8th of July, which is exactly 70 years to the day since the famous news headline came out in the Roswell Daily Record, RAAF captures flying disc, and the subsequent follow-up headline, General Rainey empties Roswell saucer when the cover-up began. And it went so well, it was so good, I thought we've got to do another one. And this is it. This is Dreaming Sources. We've got a fantastic lineup of guests coming up, including me, your good humble servant here is going to do a little speech. Then we Then we have Deborah Hatswell, who unfortunately can't be here in person, but she'll be here in spirit. Or maybe phone lines, because she's going to be Skyping in. Sorry about that. Then, after that, we have Philip and Ronald Kinsella, who you see over there doing a double act together. And tell me which one's which, will you? Because I can never work it out. And then finally, we have a very interesting chap, Nick Hayes. He's quite new on the scene, but he's been working hard in private on the subject of UFOs, which can't be seen with the naked eye, because they don't appear in visible light, but they're very real and very present, and physical objects which only radiate and reflect electromagnetic radiation outside the spectrum of visible light. Well, one in the sci-fi they call a floating device. Now, I hope you enjoy it. I hope you like the facilities here. It's all very, people were very happy with it last time. There's a bar downstairs, so you can get yourself a beer when they open, which will be pretty soon. You can also get food. You get food as well. And there's a cafe down the road as well. It's a very, very nice place, actually, just down the road on the left, so you can, on the right, sorry, so you can get yourself a cup of coffee from there. Now, there's merchandise everywhere, as you can see. You want to buy a copy of various books. There's some on Tino's table, there's Philip and Ronnie's book there, and there's Nick Hayes' book there. Marcus, I think, is going to be providing a massive, Marcus will bring in his full-size bookshelf. So it's going to be a little library in here as well. Marcus is there at the back. Yeah. So there'll be an awful lot to see during the breaks. After I've been speaking, there'll be a half-hour break, and then there will be Deborah coming on Skype. Okay, so time to begin. Are you sitting comfortably? Right. Now I'll tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Ben Emlyn-Jones, and that's my website there. Hospital Porters Against the New World Order. There's a chap in America called Jack McLan who had a group called Police Against the New World Order, and I thought what's good for police is good for hospital porters. And so the plan was born. That's me there, the porter in Buddha. I was a hospital porter for 23 years, and then I got sacked. I got discharged from the National Health Service. And why? Well, guess what? I think it was a conspiracy. Yeah. Believe it or not, that's actually, I've done an entire talk on that, so I can't go into details now, but there is evidence for that, I think. So, is there any hope? That's the question. Now, this is going to be a bit dismal, all right? You might find a lot of what I'm going to say today very sobering. But I do hope at the end you will come away enlightened and invigorated. It's not my intention to demoralise you. It's not my intention at all to break you down. It's my intention to give you facts and the serious situation that we're in. Give you the truth about the serious situation we're in. It's, you know, don't you want to have a glass of water from behind the bar? Thanks very much. I always forget that. I always forget that. Stick a gin in it if you can.
The Welsh are always thirsty, don't they?
Yeah. So, yeah, it's, we're actually living in interesting times, but it's very hazardous. What we're living in, the world we're living in today is in big trouble. And there's a lot of reasons why we might lose hope. I don't think we should, but I'll come to that later. I'll come to the reasons why we shouldn't later. But I'm going to begin with a little history lesson, or going back a long, long way through history. It's best to start at the beginning for any story. Right, the story begins basically with the creation of this thing, however it came to be. There's lots of different stories about that, but this is the planet Earth, which is our home. And all of us, apart from a handful, have spent all our time on this Earth, and we've not been anywhere else. Well, Marcus will tell you more about that tomorrow, in the details about exactly where we've been outside this Earth. But basically, this is our home planet. This is our home. This is where we are. And this is about 3 billion years old, depending on really how. Well, there's different theories about that. Now, at some point, quite recently in the history of that huge planet, these things appeared. Human beings. Yes, weird creatures, upright walking apes. With a creation, with the ability to have to think better than any other creature, and to cogitate better than any other creature. and things like that, which is very, very. Thanks, mate. Cheers. Thanks very much. Oh, cheers. And cheers. So, very unusual species in many, many ways. Now, there's lots of different stories again about how these strange life forms emerged, and it's not my intention today to delve into the various controversies over the origins of human life. There's many other different thinkers you can talk to about that, and they all have different ideas. Now, these here are cavemen. These are Australian cavemen, to be exact. I don't know how many of you have seen that series. It's very funny. But now, for a large part of our past, this is how we lived. We lived quite simple lives. We made tools out of stone and eventually other materials. But for most of our past, we lived like that. Now, again, there's a lot of different ideas about exactly how long we lived in a Stone Age situation, and about when civilization first emerged. Again, I'm not going to delve into the various controversies, because whatever I say, someone's going to disagree with me, and they might be right and I might be wrong, but that's a story for another time. But basically, we'll just stick with this basic narrative for now. For much of our history, we lived as Stone Age hunter-gatherers, and indeed, even today, there are still some people who live like this. So all of society, human society, did not develop at the same rate. Now, at some point, again, this is controversial, we started developing higher technology. We started beginning with metal tools, and eventually we learned how to build more and more complicated tools, until eventually sophisticated civilizations emerged. This is an artist's impression of Atlantis. Now, this is one of the alleged prehistoric civilizations that existed across the world. It was talked about by Plato, the philosopher. He wrote a book all about this, and there's several different interpretations of how it is. And he admitted he didn't hear the story firsthand. He heard it secondhand. And for many, many years, most official historians and archaeologists dismissed this as fantasy. Now, many still do. However, there is some evidence that such a society existed. There are certain people, such as Graham Hancock, who have been exploring the world and locating some of the remains of a possible civilization like Atlantis in various places all over the globe. There were people a long time ago where official history tells us that we were just cavemen who were building stone structures, very, very sophisticated stone structures. Now then, again, I'm not sure of all the facts here. I'm just going to give you a narrative which might be true, which my information has led me to believe is quite likely to be true. During the period that this prehistoric civilization existed, it's from an indeterminate time in the past to when it fell, which was around about the 12th to the 10th millennium BC. At some point, this society moved, it changed. Something went wrong. And how it went wrong and why it went wrong, we don't know, because the people are not there. We're their descendants, but there are no records published anyway that talk about the destruction of Atlantis and the various other these prehistoric civilizations. However, they've existed in myth. There's Atlantis, there's a story of Noah and the Ark, there's Manu from the Vedas, there's folk tales like Zaraleli from South Africa and Cantor of Gwaelod from Wales that talk of a high civilization which fell to a state of barbarism. It destroyed itself through its own degeneracy, its own corruption, its own sin, to use the biblical term. And a lot of this has been blamed on the emergence, which is probably more an effect than the cause, but that's a big story, of a secret society network called various names, but it's known very often as the Illuminati. And it's an organisation that still exists today. And this is the symbol we very often know it by. This is actually on the dollar bill. And this is known as the Eye of Providence, the eye at the top, and there's the pyramid here, which, well, it depends which historian you talk to. It can mean one thing or another. But there's an awful lot of story behind how this actually ended up on American banknotes. So the Illuminati rose to power during the period of Atlantis, and their influence brought Atlantis down. However, this is not to play victim. The Illuminati managed to bring themselves into power because the Atlanteans, in a sense, let them in. Something went wrong with the Atlantean culture itself, which allowed then the Illuminati to take root. It's often called the fall of man, and it's symbolising things such as Adam and Eve. This book by Fritz Springmeier, Bloodlines of the Illuminati, is a remarkable piece of scholarship. It is traced through using family trees and records of aristocratic bloodlines. Well, Springmeier believes he's traced the entire network through various, basically through their family trees, which all link together and can be traced right back to the beginning of history. So, for example, the Queen of England is part of the Habsburg bloodline. It's one of 13 Illuminati bloodlines, which basically control the world. And this includes most of the royal families of Europe, especially the English throne today, but those of Germany, those of Russia, which no longer exist. They're all part of the Habsburg Illuminati bloodline. The Habsburgs are still here today. Now this is Iraq, this country in the Middle East, which is called the cradle of civilization. That's its nickname. And the reason is because at the end of the 4th millennium BC, the Sumerian culture emerged. Now this, in a sense, was the re-emergence of the Illuminati into the world. After basically a long period underground, they took power again, and they took power in this culture. And I believe at a certain point soon after that, they took power in the culture we call ancient Egypt, although when that happened and how it happened and to what extent is, again, contentious, and I don't intend to address that controversy in this particular talk. But this country here is amazing. This country here is best known for the wars that have been fought there recently, but there's some amazing artifacts here. This here is a rook. You can just see these are the foundations of huge buildings, and there's some walls and there's some pyramids and things like that, of one of the first post-Atlantean cities that were ever created. It's all desert today, but many, many years ago, around about 5,000 years ago, this was a huge alluvial plain with farmland, and Uruk was a thriving city. Because of climate change and because of mistakes over the use of farming, it turned to desert. But it's still there, you can still see the ruins of it. So this was maybe, since Atlantis, this was the first culture in which the Illuminati played a major role. You can't see this very well, sorry, the slide's a bit small, but this is actually a cuneiform tablet. This is the language of Sumer, the written language, and it is a story called the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is very, very interesting. It's a massive tale. It's one of the earliest recorded stories ever, and it contains some very, very interesting themes, including it's the first fictional reference to zombies. Have any of you seen my zombie talk?
Yeah.
Yeah, you've seen that. That's yeah, it's very interesting indeed. Egypt. This was another of the great civilizations that rose at the end of the 4th millennium BC, and this was an absolutely incredible society that created some marvellous artefacts, and we still don't know exactly how they did this, or even when some of them are built. I mean, the Sphinx, there's evidence to suggest the Sphinx is much older than it looks like, than it appears to be. The pyramids, marvellous constructions. We couldn't do it today. Put these millions and millions of stone blocks together the way that the ancient Egyptians had. It's clear that they were not primitive. It's clear that they were not. There were supposedly people who were still in the Bronze Age. They hadn't invented the lever. They hadn't invented the pulley. They hadn't invented the wheel. Nonsense. These were sophisticated people. But then we come forward a couple of thousand years, we're getting closer to the present day now, the Roman Empire. Now the Roman Empire is really the first emergence of an Illuminati-occupied culture into much of Europe. Now it's possible that ancient Greece had a presence of the Illuminati, I don't know that specifically, but definitely the Roman Empire was a major push for the Illuminati to get into Europe. And you see, at its fullest extent, it stretched right the way here, from the Gulf and Persian Gulf, right up to the plains of northern England. But it occupied the entire Mediterranean area and the western seaboard of Europe. A huge state structure made of various provinces that were governed semi-independently, but all paying homage to Caesar, the Caesar in Rome. And the Caesars of Rome during the Roman Republic and during the Empire were connected to this bloodline. They were connected to the bloodlines that Springmeier talks about. This wall here, this is amazing. This wall, this is Hadrian's Wall. Has any of you seen this? I went there just a couple of weeks ago. It's to Wall's End, it's called, and there's a place called Segedunum, which is a fort where the Romans had their fortress. Because this was one of the architectural wonders of the world. It's 84 miles long. It stretches all the way from what's now the Tyne Estuary to the Solway Firth, right across the north of England. And it covers, you see, it goes up and down hills. There were fortresses every few miles. Thousands and thousands of soldiers were posted here continuously to keep this wall manned and to basically to protect it. The reason they built such a wall like that could only be because they wanted to protect their territory in Britain. When the Romans conquered Britain, it was a slow, tortuous process. It began in AD 40, but it took over a century for them to actually settle down. They tried to get the whole of Ireland. In the end, they decided just to stop here at the northern border and just cut their losses and just be pleased with what they got. Everything south of that wall is called Britannia, the province of Rome. Everything north was known as Caledonia. These were independent tribes which existed. And obviously, they were very hostile. I mean, this is why the wall was built. But it's pretty clear that Britannia, this province, was very, very important to the Romans. There was a lot of contention actually about whether it was actually worth having a Roman Britain at all. And there were some people in Rome, some high officials would say, "Oh, leave it, it's not worth it, let's leave Britain alone. It's more trouble than it's worth." Because at one point, one quarter of the entire Roman legions were posted in Britain, that one little province. You saw the size of the empire. But one quarter of all the military strength of the Roman Empire, at one point, at certain points, at its peak, was posted to Britain. So Britain was very important to the Romans. And the reasons why are, again, I can't go into details, but Andy Thomas has talked about this, and a few other people. And it's to do with ley lines and energy points and things like that. Britain is often talked about as being the heart chakra of the world. I know that sounds a bit flaky, but there is a subject, there is a reason to take this sort of thing seriously, in my view. And maybe that's why you have massive numbers of ancient stone monuments in Britain, such as Stonehenge. And, well, in the West Country of England is the heartland of the crop circle phenomenon too. Now this is a statue of Boudica, Queen Boudica, who led a rebellion against the Roman occupation in AD 60. And she was a queen of the Iceni tribe, which is in what's today called Norfolk. And she tried to destroy the Roman occupiers of Britain with her army and free Britain from Roman rule. It didn't work. There was a big battle in the end, and the rebellion failed. It was crushed at the last moment. And this statue was put up in the 19th century as a memorial to Boudica, although you could see quite clearly by style. It's also placed in London by the Houses of Parliament. I'm sure wherever Boudica's grave is, she's turning in it. That she's actually being used as a symbol for the very, very same authoritarian system that she resisted many, many years later. What's interesting about the Boudica Rebellion, and indeed the whole history of the Roman occupation of Britain, is it does represent a clash not only between two cultures and two civilizations, but of a battle, the most recent, most obvious situation in where an Illuminati controlled society battled against a pre-Illuminati society. This gives it enormous, it makes it very interesting, very poignant tale. Now, the Roman Empire eventually collapsed. It was replaced by the Church, the Holy Roman Church, the Catholic Church, and other cultures emerged in Britain, such as the Anglo-Saxons. I don't know much about this particular period. This is the early Middle Ages. Whether the Anglo-Saxons were Illuminati or not, again, that's contentious. Now, in 1066, the Normans conquered. And in this case, we enter kind of the modern period of Britain, almost 1,000 years ago. This is the Bayeux Tapestry. It's an extraordinary work of art. I think it's about 200 feet long, a strip of cloth. You can actually see it. It's in the museum. And it tells the story of the Norman conquest of Britain in almost like a comic strip. You see these pictures there, and you move from one picture to the other, and it goes along. And it tells that story in a graphic novel form. Then we come forward a few hundred years, and the emergence of the black nobility. Now, this emerged in what is today Italy, around about the time of the Knights Templar, and I won't go into the Knights Templar because it's too complicated. But the black nobility was very, very important because it essentially established the financial system that we use today. It essentially created the banking. In its earliest form, the system of money and banking that we use. In other words, things such as concepts such as credit really can be. Well, these things have always existed, but on a large scale, in terms of organisation, it can be traced back to the black nobility. This is a black nobility funeral here, as you can see, with their uniforms, and there's the guy. I think he's a pope because they had influence on the church as well.
Why did they call it black nobility?
I don't know.
Dark force.
Yeah, evil forces. Well, this actually is a basic summary of the political situation of the world today. We have here the eye in the pyramid, the eye of Providence, which represents, well, I'm not exactly sure what lies at the top. Some people say there's green monsters, lizards. Some people say they're aliens. There's all kinds of theories. But whoever they are this malevolent force that took power back in the time of Atlantis. Still here now. There's the world monarch is the chairman of the Council of 13. There's the Council of 13 below it. The Committee of 300. There's and then there's think tanks. You can see these various kinds of think tanks. The banking system there. Then there's corporations. There's religion, military, police, government, intelligence community. There's the media, and there's the people at the bottom. Us. We're at the bottom. And from the point of view of the people up here, there's a book actually called The Committee of 300. I can't remember what's the name of the author. Oh, I've forgotten his name now. But it's a really interesting book about this. But we down here are just another breed of farm animal from their point of view. They don't regard themselves as the same species as us up here. Even though they appear in human form, they don't see themselves as normal humans. They see themselves as, in a sense, a breed apart. Can't see that very well. That's a pile of money. Now, finance is one of the ways in which it's one of the tools, one of the weapons that this elite uses to control the people. And you may think, well, why is that? I mean, it's just money. It's just you pay for things, you earn it, you pay for things. Yeah, I mean, in an ideal situation, that's what it would be. Money's not a bad thing, money's a good thing. I mean, money has been used since prehistoric times. There's been coins and things like that. But with the emergence of credit and the emergence of promissory notes, which is what banks do. They keep capital, in other words, gold and things like that, and they would issue notes as receipts, and these notes eventually became used for currency in themselves. You find it wasn't long before someone thought we can use this to control people. We can actually use this system to keep people in check, because if you keep control of people's purse strings, you can make them do what you want, because then your livelihood depends on them. So, for example, if you take out a mortgage, the word mortgage is actually French. It's a Norman word. It entered the English language through the Norman conquest, interestingly. It literally means death grip. Although you won't hear that down at the Bradford and Bingley, they won't tell you that. Because when you have it, of course, you have to pay it back. You have to pay it back. You have to pay it back with interest. And of course, interest rates are very important. Even if you set interest rates, you can make people pay more or less. Savings are worth more or less, things like that. But the amount of promissory credit that is actually in circulation at the moment is, I think it's 40 quadrillion US dollars. Someone said something ridiculous like that. Quadrillion is 1,000 trillion, which is amazing, because I read another economist who calculated that the world, the planet Earth, in raw capital is only worth about 70 trillion. So there's no way we can ever possibly pay all this credit back. It's not possible, because it outnumbers the amount of capital in the world many, many times over. Right, now all nation states have some form of army. It is used to defend that state against hostile aggressors from abroad. And this is the purpose of the military. It's a perfectly legitimate purpose, completely lawful under international law. There are international laws such as the Kellogg-Briand Pact, which state what the actual crucial purpose of the military is. It is to, under the Kellogg-Briand Pact, which all major nations of the world signed, including Britain. It was signed, I think, in the 1920s, in the aftermath of the terrible Great War. Basically, you would not wage a preemptive war against another state unless you basically would just be defensive. You would only wage war if you were attacked, invaded, your territory or your people were attacked first, and then you could use your armed forces. You agreed to use the armed forces only to defend those people. But that doesn't seem to be happening now. What you'll find is, if you join one of the armed forces, you're more likely to be sent quite a long away from home, very often to get involved in a war which doesn't seem to have anything to do with your country. That's certainly the case now with wars today. And so what's going on? Why are the armed forces being used in this way? Why are they being used? Why is our government sending these young men off to die and be injured and to cause terrible destruction before they themselves are destroyed, when no one's invaded us? We haven't invaded successfully since the Norman conquest. So why? It's all to do with globalisation, global politics. And of course now, religion. Now, I consider myself a spiritual person. I think a lot of what people call spirituality is real. However, I'm not religious. I'll go to church if it's for a wedding or a funeral. I don't go every Sunday. I don't worship any Lord. I think Jesus was... I don't believe Jesus was the Son of God, no more than anyone else. I think Jesus was a very wise man. I think he was a spiritual man. I think he had mediumship skills. So we talked today about psychics and mediums. Philip and Ron will talk more about that later and give you some more details on that, I'm sure. But I believe he was one of these type of people. I don't believe he was an immaculate conception. He was not a virgin birth. I think he was conceived in the usual way, and I expect Joseph was his father. It's really, when you look at the actual details of the various world religions, it seems they're often based on rather peculiar mythologies. And so, but then many other people believe these things to be accurately true. But when you look at the origins of various religions, they tie into the same bloodlines. They tie into the same secret society network, seems to be behind them. For example, Christianity, as we know it today, is essentially a creation of the Roman Empire. Jesus himself would probably be horrified at what the church has become. And psychology. This is a very important one. If you can work out how the human mind functions, you can find a weapon that can alter that function so that people think, feel and behave in the way you want them to. And this is what's been done. It's been done since time immemorial, but today it's become very, very sophisticated indeed. It goes into many, many areas, including propaganda, into direct brain alteration, into indoctrination and trauma-based behavioural modification. It's an extremely sinister, very, very unpleasant situation we're in today. But if you could change the way people think and feel, you don't need to control them by force, because you put them in a situation where they won't even know that they're imprisoned. They'll think they're free. That's the problem with it. That is, from their point of view, the wonder of mind control, and from our point of view, the terrible thing it is. Now the media. We have a media today which is beyond anything the world has ever seen before. You know, it's a television screen bigger than this screen here, in your front room. It can take up an entire wall of your house. And it can give you access to literally millions of hours of viewing time on hundreds and hundreds of TV channels. All flat screen, in 3D displays, high definition. But I mean, when you look at it, if you look at what's on television with an analytical mind, over 99% of it is drivel. It is specifically aimed to be comprehensible to a 14-year-old. Editors will actually strike words from script because that word's too long, you can't use that. You know, this is troll feed, to use the words of George Orwell. And George Orwell came up with the word Big Brother. Big Brother was the name of the leader of the superstate of Oceania in his fictional work 1984, which was allegorical fiction. So it was a story, it was made up, it was fiction, but it was a fictional story about reality. This is the kind of books I write. If you get my books from Tino's stall if you want a copy. Big Brother in the Society Visions by Orwell. He wrote the book in 1948 to 49. Had these things called telescreens, which were like television sets, but they had cameras on them as well. And guess what we have now? We have smart TVs that actually watch you while you're watching them. Orwell was right. George Orwell was actually a member of the Fabian Society, which is one of the think tanks which I showed you on that pyramid, specialising in mind control. It is part of a huge network of psychological manipulation societies who, by their own admission, say they want to take over the world by controlling our minds. They've just said it in as many words. They've written books about it. It's surprising how candid these power brokers are when they're writing books and things like that, because they know most people don't read books. Most people just watch the proll feed. So they can just speak it quite openly. People like Zbigniew Brzezinski, who's written 3 or 4 books, telling about his plans to take over the world. And he does it quite openly. He knows that most people won't read the book anyway. Those who do will probably laugh it off. Be distracted. What's on TV next? Be distracted back to the proll feed. So in this nightmarish dystopian novel, I think George Orwell was trying to warn people. He's trying to tell us, down the ages, future generations, about what was planned and about what we have to avoid. Now, he could have written a factual book. He could have written, I'm an insider from the Fabian Society, this is my memoir. And what would have happened? He'd be called a conspiracy theorist. He's a nutcase. And this is one of the reasons why allegorical fiction is an excellent way of getting messages through to people that you wouldn't be able to if you spoke to them just as in a factual documentary way. This is why I use it as well. And this book, 1984, is a classic. It's a bestseller. One of the classic novels of all time. You can't see that very well, but that says United Earth. Because the goal of the Illuminati is to create an authoritarian one world government in which the nation states are dissolved into superstates, which then are dissolved into the one world dictatorship. And you may think, well, that's not going to happen, is it? Countries are sovereign and we're independent. Oh, are we? How many of us are sovereign and independent? If you're in the European Union, you're called a member state. They never use the word country to describe any of the constituent states of the European Union. Never. You won't hear them use that word. And again, this is all in George Orwell. In his book, he describes a world in which the entire globe is divided into 3 superstates, and that the nation-state system no longer exists. And indeed, Britain, in that world, is known as Airstrip 1. And you think there's no... This again, they speak openly about it. Is the New World Order a theory? Ask these guys. These are people you all recognise. Adolf Hitler. National Socialism will use its own revolution for the establishment of a new world order. That there's King Edward VIII. You can't... It doesn't have his name there, but he's the father of old Queen Elizabeth. Whatever happens, whatever the outcome, a new order is going to come into the world. It will be buttressed with police power. When peace comes this time, there's going to be a new order of social justice. Well, there's different kinds of peace. The Romans had peace. They called it Pax Romana, Roman peace. But again, this was an Orwellian language because like what's that one? Pax Romana was achieved when everyone who just didn't agree with you was destroyed, and everyone was left with being too frightened to do anything about it. And that's the kind of peace they're talking about here. And we have here, so we have this, these guys here from the Council, CFR, Council on Foreign Relations, this chap here. Arthur Schlesinger, Foreign Affairs, Institute of Foreign Affairs. George Herbert Walker Bush. And of course, the immortal and inevitable David Rockefeller. Oh, I think he's finally shuffled off this mortal coil. I thought he'd go on forever, I really do. So they talk about it openly. They say what they want to do. If people say they want to do these things, why do so few people believe them? And there's even these, they put these little hints in. For example, these are the Georgia Guidestones, sometimes called America's Stonehenge. It's much, much newer than Stonehenge. It dates back to 1982. These blocks were put up in Georgia, USA, and they have various, it's a constitution essentially for a new world. And some of it sounds good and progressive. They talk about having courts where there's common sense and things like that. But they also say things such as maintain humanity under a population level of 500,000. That's 500 million. Right, well that's a tenth of what we have in the world today. So how are they going to maintain that? How are they going to get today's population down to 1/10 of what it is now? It's even assuming that everyone will cooperate. I mean, it's not possible unless they kill large numbers of people. There's things such as be not a cancer upon the earth, leave room for nature. The idea that humans are a cancer on the earth is become so mainstream now that that it's very rarely questioned. And the truth of the matter is our lifestyle is very destructive, but that's got a lot to do with the fact that we don't have things such as free energy, which I've talked about in other discussions. But the idea that somehow what's going wrong in the world is our fault, and we need to pay for it. And there's people like, there's the voluntary human extinction movement. Have you heard about that? They deliberately avoid having children. They all get sterilised when they're like 18, and they say, I'm never going to have children because humans have to die out. It's the only way to save the world. Vehemence, they're called. Vehemence, voluntary human extinction movement. Look them up. So, if we have a one world government, we won't need the military, we won't need the armed forces at all because there'll be nobody to fight wars with. Or will there? Now this is Dixon of Dock Green on the left. I don't know if you, it's a very old TV series, but it was about a really nice policeman who was a guardian of the community, and everyone respected, and he respected them. And there were a lot of people, in the old days there were lots of local bobbies who were like that. But the police today, that's what they're like today. They're masked, they're armoured, and they are armed. And there's been several scandals certainly over the last few years of people being shot in rather dodgy circumstances, and sometimes there's a trial and the officer is exonerated. But that's just the start of what they've got planned. I mean, this is what they'll do. They'll simply use the military to quell any resistance until they have the equivalent of Pax Romana. Until such time as things have gone so far that there'll be no one left to fight, because everyone will be incapable mentally of conceiving of rebellion, which is again what George Orwell predicted. We will all love Big Brother, and then finally they won't need these guys anymore. Now, Agenda 21 is a very sinister thing. This is kind of this is in a way the goal of the idea that we are a cancer upon the earth. This is in a sense the chemotherapy that the powers that be want to bring in to cure the world of the cancer. And it's not, it doesn't say we're going to exterminate humans, but it does say that humans are going to have to live under very, very rigid and controlled conditions. In a resource-based planned economy, in specifically designated sectors where the only place you can build cities and things like that in certain areas. We'll all our energy use will be rationed, all our food will be rationed. And if you object, well, don't you want to save the world? And of course, transhumanism. This is a big subject. I won't go into it in detail, but basically they want to actually get rid of natural humans altogether. These biological people who evolved, as I showed you at the beginning, this species, this organism that evolved naturally on the earth, all those, however long ago it was. And again, people disagree a lot. They want to turn us into cyborgs, into robots. There we go. Time for them to die. This again is what they're saying on the Georgia Guidestones. They want a smaller population. Not because we really are a cancer on the earth, but because they need fewer people to control. And this guy, Bill Gates, is a dark horse. He actually stood up during his TED talk and he said, we need to reduce human population. We're trying to do that, but despite all our efforts, including vaccination, we haven't managed it yet. That's what he kind of wanted. And you know what? This went over the heads of the audience and they didn't even stir. Why would vaccination have anything to do with population reduction? Vaccination is about making population rise because people won't die of disease, won't they? And chemtrails. Now you look up at the sky, this is what you see these days. They're even changing the very air we breathe. Right now we've been prepared for official UFO disclosure. Are we? I doubt it. I'm in two minds about this. I've done an entire presentation, but I am dubious, I really am. But don't worry, brace yourselves. The conspiracy theorists are coming. We're here. We're going to save the world, aren't we? Let's go out there and let's save the world, because this is what we're going to do. This is how important our job is. Right? That's how vital it is. So don't worry, you're going to be safe, or are you? Infighting. This has taken over the whole UFO, paranormal conspiracy theory movement in all its forms. It's everywhere. I mean, Deborah may say a little bit about how it's infected the Bigfoot research community now. It was wonderful. See, I got into this when I got into all this years ago. I was watching people like this, David Icke, Alex Jones, There's the 9/11 truth movement, things like people understood what was going on, and everybody kept their personal issues personal. And they left them aside when it came to getting the job done. But now what do you have? You have people like Daniela Verite. Do you know Daniela Verite? She used to do YouTube videos. She's not so well known now. She had an argument with someone on Facebook. Such the words which start so much, don't they? And then guess what happened? Then the people she had an argument with started publishing material that she was an agent. She was an agent put in the truth movement to disable it, and to confuse it. Same with this guy, Darren Perks. Now that people have been accusing him of doing all kinds of awful things. I don't know if they're right or I don't know if they're wrong, but the campaign against Darren Perks ended up taking over the original UK Exit Politics group. There's now a new one, but they had to abandon the old one because every single conversation was all about Darren Perks. And the admins on that group started deleting anything that wasn't about Darren Perks. Same with this guy, Kevin Annett, a man who's campaigned against child abuse in Canada and many other places. Ben Fellows is another chap. This chap went to Turkey to talk. He went through Turkey. He went overland through Turkey to India to talk to the Dalai Lama about child abuse. He raised some money, telling everyone what he was going to do. He didn't go by plane. He went overland, and he went through Turkey in the middle of winter. People said, "Oh, he's just raising money to get a free holiday." He went through Turkey in the middle of winter, which is really cold there. It's not hot like it is. You think you go to Turkey, you go to the coasts and places like that, and you sun yourself on the sea. On the seashore, but in winter time inland it's freezing cold there, much colder than it is here. But this guy was accused of all kinds of things. He was accused of fraud, he was accused of setting up false charities, and these accusations were all over the internet. But of course, nobody called the police, nobody sued him or anything like that. They just went around saying they were going to do it. And finally, this situation all culminated with what I call the troll crisis, and it's been running for a couple of years now. This is Larry Warren. He is one of the principal witnesses to the Rendlesham Forest UFO incident. He's also the original whistleblower. Without him, we might not even know that this event had taken place. Yet, about 2 years ago, he had a friend he was living with, and they got on very well. She was just one of his biggest supporters. And then, I don't know exactly why, but they had a personal falling out. Their friendship ended very, very abruptly, very, very dramatically, and very, very vitriol, with a lot of vitriol. There's an angry breakup between the two. Okay? In happier times, this will be the end of it. It will be a personal issue between the two of them. But unfortunately, his former friend went all over the internet saying, Larry Warren's a fraud. He made the whole thing up. He's lying. And she started posting a lot of material claiming to explain why this was. I took a look at this material. I gave it an honest assessment, and at the end of it, I realised, after just a very, very short peruse of the so-called evidence, I realised that it was all nonsense. She'd made it up. And I said this. I gave this assessment, and I was attacked. I was accused. I was told that because I got sacked from the hospital because I was abusing disabled people. All kinds of things like this, and it escalated into a situation now where this has almost taken over the whole of ufology, and there's been some more. I think someone in the audience knows what I'm talking about. There's been some events had to be cancelled because of attacks. Because of attacks by these group of trolls against, not just against Larry, but against Larry's friends, against people who are organising conferences where Larry's going to be, even people who buy tickets for conferences where Larry's going to be. It's getting ridiculous. The latest target for the troll community is this guy, Simon Parkes. Now, whatever you think of it, this guy, I like the guy, I know him. People have started off by saying, well, I don't think he's telling the truth. And if you don't believe him, by all means say so. Explain why you think he's not telling the truth. But that's not what happens. What happens is you get like personal attacks against the man. He gets accused of all kinds of things. People who know him get accused. People who don't join the trolls in their campaign get attacked, because one thing all the trolls have in common: sanctity of the cause. You're either with them or you're with the target of their abuse. That's the rule. There's of course been, if you follow this, you'll find that the people are saying all kinds of things about horrible things that Simon Parkes has done. Miles Johnston is another one who's been connected with this, and myself. Apparently we have done all kinds of nasty, nasty things. Crimes against humanity, almost. But do you know how many times Simon, Miles and myself have been arrested and questioned by the police? How many times have we, how many times?
No.
0. They've not even called them. Because if they really thought that we were doing this, same with Larry, same with the other people, if any of these people really believed that we were guilty of these kinds of crimes, they'd stop making videos about it and they'd call the police. They'd take the videos down, because first thing you do, if someone is, if someone's doing, you think someone's doing something criminal, you don't make videos about it and put it on the internet, because that could ruin a trial. Because the first thing the defence barrister is going to say, well, my client can't possibly have a fair trial because it's all been playing out on the internet. Look, the jury have probably seen these videos. So the first thing the police would do is tell you to take the videos down. It hasn't been done. It's all nonsense. Could everybody who's ever disagreed with me on Facebook about anything ever, please unfriend me now? When was the last time you actually disagreed with someone on social media in a polite way? Ever? It hasn't happened to me for ages, I'll tell you. People either agree with me or they start calling me names. I suggested actually we have some kind of tribunal system to get this, to sort these sort of things out, because I was just getting so fed up with it. And I know it's just a thought experiment. I know it's not realistic. But it was just an idea that came to me, and I wrote about it, and I just suggested. And seeing what happened, of course, I think it's the fact that I even contemplated this kind of thing is a sign of how bad the situation has got recently. Now this chap is, recognise him, this is an ancient Greek guy, his name's Aristotle. Very important man, he was a student of Plato, the chap who wrote the book about Atlantis. But he developed some interesting ideas of his own. He essentially defined logic. Now we all know about logic, and logic has always existed in our mind. This was the first man who codified it and developed it. And he's vitally important in the story of the creation of civilization on Earth and the development of humanity. Yet we're now entering the post-rational world. And the troll crisis is a fundamentally post-rational phenomenon. This is what we're up against. This is what we're possibly facing. Why on earth are people spending their entire free time, precious free time, on the internet, this precious gift of free expression, to make up lies about people and see how far they can go, see how many people will believe them? And sometimes it's over the most trivial things. Oh, Larry Warren said this, Larry Warren said that. Well, all the time, we have a malevolent force on earth which is plotting the destruction of the world. Can't we defer these personal disputes till after we got the job done? Will no one understand why, until we've sorted this problem out, I will reprioritise somewhat? I tell you, when we beat this New World Order, I'm going to spend the rest of my life writing books. I'll write a 5-volume treatise on who I think is a shill and who's not a shill. Who's the king of the castle? Who's the dirty rascal? I'll dedicate the rest of my life to it. But first we need to stop this. Right, I'm now going to give you the information that's keeping me alive. Now that there is Donald Trump, who lives here at the White House. Well, actually, he's in the toilet at the moment. He had too much vodka with his breakfast this morning. He'll be out later. And this Brexit, believe it or not, Britain is now, well, hopefully, there's a lot of people trying to stop it, will leave the European Union. And this guy, Donald Trump, is a man, he's the first guy, probably in living memory, who actually became US president against the wishes of the cabal. The secret society network, which I talked about, which dates back a long, long way away. I know these issues are very contentious. I know some people don't agree with me that they're good things. Some people don't agree that this is something, these things have not been planned. And it's just another deeper part of the conspiracy, Ben, why can't you see it? But I don't agree. I think these two incidents in 2016 are the first sign that the powers that be, the Illuminati, the deep state, whatever you want to call them, even if just temporarily, lost their grip on the political structures of the world. They're now trying to reassert their control, and they're doing it in various different ways. But the very fact that it even happened is encouraging. Well, it doesn't matter what you think of this man, it doesn't matter what you think of the European Union, per se, the very fact that it went against the will of the powers that be should give us encouragement. This is Lyle Watson. He's a brilliant scientist from South Africa. Sadly, he died a couple of years ago. But he was like a properly trained scientist, but he was open-minded. He was an open-minded scientist who delved into areas that many, many other scientists wouldn't dare tread. And these are really cute little monkeys, aren't they? They're really lovely. They're called snow macaques, and they live in Japan. And there's a big sanctuary there called Kashima Island in Japan. It's a big sanctuary for these lovely little snow macaques. Now, in 1952, there was an experiment done there where they actually introduced some new food to these monkeys, including potatoes. And they grew potatoes on the island. And the monkeys, being intelligent creatures, they quickly learned to dig them up and eat them because they realised they were good food. So I won't be much longer. I'm nearly done. But then what's actually happened was one of them learned that if you wash the potato in the sea, it doesn't only get the grit and the earth off it, and it makes it much nicer. You get some salt in it, and it tastes better. Now, the first monkey that did this, the others watched, and they thought, I'll try that. And they learned the usual way, by imitation. But then they reached a certain point where suddenly monkeys, not only on Kashima, but on other parts of Japan, other snow macaques in other areas, started doing the same thing, even though they had no contact with the original monkey. It's almost as if the knowledge reached a critical mass within that population, and then all of a sudden it entered a state where it's almost automatically spread to all other members of that species. Lyle Watson calculated that it was roughly 1% of the monkey population was necessary for this knowledge to then spread into the rest of the population. That's where you get the phrase 100th monkey effect. This is Carl Jung, scientist, psychoanalyst, colleague of Sigmund Freud, who eventually broke with Freud because he developed his own ideas about the subconscious mind, about the collective unconscious, which means at a higher level our minds are linked together, which means we in this room, the knowledge that we're sharing now and the knowledge we're disseminating, once it reaches a certain point, like with those monkeys, it'll flip into the rest of the population. So it may seem like there's no hope, it may seem like the New World Order getting more and more power behind them, but we never know when we might hit that 100th monkey point. And that's when things will start spreading and moving much, much quicker. It'll go like that, and then suddenly go like that. And that's when you get things like disclosure. I think the Brexit-Trump thing is a good sign that we're nearing the tipping point. And when that happens, the New World Order will be over. And also, some of them are on our side. Now, this refers to the media. The media is a tool of propaganda. Now, in a completely controlled media, you would have just continuous propaganda over and over again, so it wouldn't look too obvious. There would be a very attenuated, very, very feeble and controlled counter-propositional positions put over. Okay, but you don't see that. The counter-propositions are far, far too sophisticated and far too sincere to be a concoction of propaganda. Although I know a lot of people disagree with me on that. You know, they say things like, well, Avatar's controlled, Ben, can't you see it? I said, well, have you seen this? It's a good film, it's quite simplistic, but it's very, very interesting, some of its things. And I think to myself, if this is just controlled opposition, then what couldn't be? By what criteria would you designate something as not controlled? Here's another one, a very British coup. This has just been re-released. Their book's just been come out in a new edition. It says the book that predicted the rise of Corbyn. It's interesting. But this is about a prime minister in Britain who was removed in a military coup. Very, very interesting story indeed. Which in a sense displays the work of the deep state. How it operates, how it's willing to let the people decide through democracy up to a point, but when we don't decide what they want us to decide, they step in and take over, which shows what a fraud the whole democratic system is. Wild Palms. This is very, very similar to A Very British Coup. Very, very interesting. It's about the media and about the way secret societies control the media through propaganda. As is this. This is the British equivalent of Wild Palms. This has just been released onto DVD now. It's called The Vision. And it's the second last film of this actor here, a very famous chap, Dirk Bogarde. He was very old when he was in this film. You've probably seen him in many, many other films. This was his second last movie. And it's about a secret society that takes over a massive media network to control people's minds through television. Blake 7, who's seen Blake 7?
Oh, yeah.
This is another of these counter-propositional programmes. This is from the BBC, this was. The heartland of government, state, mind control. Yet, the themes in this series are incredible. It's about a group of rebels set in the future on a spaceship. And there's no way it's just there to sort of like, as a pressure valve or something like that, as what some people theorise some of these programmes are. And I won't go into details of this, but this is a great series. Gone to Seed and Voyage of the Unicorn. Those two, they're TV miniseries, and they are, I think, inspire freedom on more deeper, more spiritual level. But I won't go into detail now because I've almost run out. But we shouldn't despair. There is hope. And at a higher level, you know, this is simply a part of our dynamics. A part of our existence on this earth is to be in conflict. Adversity is necessary for us to develop. This is George Steiner. He's a philosopher who's spoken an awful lot about Adam and Eve, and he goes back to the Adam and Eve story, and he says Adam and Eve knew exactly what they were doing when they ate that apple. It wasn't, they didn't fall from grace, they entered a state of grace. They just couldn't stand another day in that awful place where God controlled everything and there was just literally nothing to do. They died of boredom. And you've got to laugh. The Academy of Conspiracy Theories. Put tinfoil hat on everything. There's Giorgio Tsoukalos there, so it's a bit too small to see. But honestly, humour is essential for me. I need it to survive in this world. You've got to have a laugh at things. You've got to. Well, I do anyway, because if I didn't, I'd lose my mind. But humour is, even laughing about the grimmest and darkest things, it's so uplifting. It really is. Remember, guys, life's an adventure. We have adversity, we have control, we have oppression, we have abuse, we have pain, we have suffering. But really, we're on a journey here. We're on a journey, an eternal journey of spiritual development. And sometimes the greatest thing a person can do to aid our spiritual development is to be our enemy. And we have some of the best enemies that money can buy. Thank you very much. And do pick up some copies of my books. I've got 2 copies. There's 2 on the table. There's more underneath. Roswell Rising, a novel of disclosure. Roswell Revealed, a world after disclosure. Where I talk about the whole UFO issue and Roswell and exopolitics and if you love that sort of thing, you'll love those books. And they're allegorical fiction too, like Orwell. So now I think we have, we're going to
Take a break?
we're going to take a little break for half an hour.
Ben, so we've all got to get to the Liberator.
Oh right, yes, beam me up. Teleport, yes.
Any quick questions, Ben?
Yeah, well, yeah, you can go off for your break, but I mean, in half an hour we've got another speaker. Does anyone want to ask me anything? Well, come speak to me privately if you've got a question. But I think the pub's open now. Probably the bar might be open now if you want to have a drink. Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you, Ben. That was great, Ben.
Cheers.
Put in a nutshell, Benjamin.